With the NFL draft wrapped up, I wanted to give a look back at every team's picks and grade how I think they did in the draft. Now we're just going to get into this quickly and start with the Arizona Cardinals. They had some pretty nice picks. I really like the Walter Nolan pick. I think he's a great fit for their defense and can easily be one of the top defensive tackles in this class. Will Johnson, I think, was also a pretty big steal. He fell due to his knee injury, and there have been some questions about how long he can really last, but I think he's a great corner. The rest of the draft is honestly okay. They went pretty heavy on the defense, which their defense really needs help. They also had some pretty big needs on offense that they really didn't address this draft. You can't really address the entire team's needs in one draft. But you would have liked to see like maybe a wide receiver and some offensive line picks in maybe like the 3rd or 4th rounds where there was still some decent value for those players. But I'll still give the Cardinals a B+ because I really like what they got from Walter Nolan and Will Johnson. And honestly, if you can get 2 to 3 great players from a draft, that's a very successful draft. Next, we'll move on to the Atlanta Falcons. And I think they had a very good draft. I love all of their selections. I thought they got great value for all of them. I love the Jalen Walker fit. I love the James Pierce fit. Xavier Watts was fantastic value in the 3rd round. I like the Billy Bowman pick as well. And Jack Nelson is a solid pick in the 7th round, but really, I don't really care about 7th round picks all that much. You're just hoping they make the team. But every other pick was great. However, that James Pierce trade up was dreadful value. They had no need to give up a future first for James Pierce. I don't believe he's that type of player where you give up such a premium for. The pick in a vacuum is a great pick, and I would probably give it like an A+ for the player, but the trade I give like an F. But every other pick was very good, and honestly, the trade is the only thing dragging this down. They also didn't have a whole lot of selections, but I felt like they did the most with it. So I'm going to give the Falcons an A-. If they didn't get such awful value on the James Pierce trade, I think they could have gotten an A+ with the players they got. The next team to look at is the Baltimore Ravens, and I think they had a fantastic draft. Malachi Starks was a great pick. Mike Green, ignoring his off-the-field stuff, was a fantastic steal. Emory Jones was a pretty good pick. Teddy Buchanan, a little early for me in my opinion. But man, I like all the other picks. All the other picks were great value, especially Aeneas Pebbles. I think that was a fantastic pick. All around, very good draft. However, looking at Mike Green, his off-the-field controversy is a little bit concerning. That's the main reason why he's down so far. If it was just his talent alone, he's a first-round prospect. But taking Mike Green, you're betting on the athlete, and you're hoping the off-the-field stuff doesn't really come back to bite you. But otherwise, I think they got great value on all of their picks. They just went best player available, and it turned into a very good draft. So I'm going to give the Ravens an A+. I love the value on all of their picks. Mike Green is the only irk for me, and a bunch of day 3 picks. Lots of dart throws. I think at least a few of these day 3 picks will work out. Up next is the Buffalo Bills. Their top 3 picks are pretty solid players. Maxwell Harrison is a pretty good player. TJ Sanders, I think, is a pretty good player. And Landon Jackson, where they got him, I think is a steal. However, I'm not big on the value they got on Harrison and TJ Sanders. Harrison, in my opinion, was not the best corner available at pick 30. And TJ Sanders, that draft trade, iffy. If they just stayed and picked TJ Sanders, probably would be a decent pick, but the draft value they gave up is just meh. Deion Walker, I like him as a potential prospect and a developmental guy. Round 4, I think, is a good spot for him, but you may question whether he really fits with the Bills or not. I also like their later round picks. I like Jackson Hawes, who's a very good blocking tight end. Dorian Strong, I think they got very good value on Dorian Strong. And Chase Lunt is a good developmental tackle. I like the class. I'm not in love with it. I'm not sure they got any difference makers in this class. Just a bunch of like solid guys to fill out your team with. So I'm going to give the Bills a B-. I'm just not big on the value they got for their players. Moving on to the Panthers, I think this is a pretty solid class. Tedero McMillan at the top. I'm actually not a huge fan of McMillan, and I don't really like him at 8. Especially since you already have a similar receiver in Xavier Legette. But having another big receiver doesn't hurt. But I like the value they got on their next 2 picks in Nick Scorton and Princely Umanmelian. They really love picking names that are really hard to pronounce. I love the value on both of those picks, and they really help address a need on defense. Trevor Etienne is a weird one to me. I guess they're hedging their bets on Jonathan Brooks. But honestly, a little bit early to pick a running back when that's not really a priority need for them. However, I do like Latham Ransom, I like Cam Jackson, I like Mitchell Evans. I think those are all solid day 3 picks. Overall, I'm going to give this class an A-. Overall, pretty good. I think they got great value on their edges. McMillan, I'm not super high on, but I do see the vision with it, and I think they really help Bryce Young. We'll see how this turns out for them. I think they'll need at least another draft to make this team a real contender. Next up is the Chicago Bears. Top of the draft went all to offense, trying to help Caleb Williams develop even further. Colson Loveland, not my favorite pick. I would have preferred Tyler Warren here, but depending how Ben Johnson wants to run his offense, the scheme fit may be better for Loveland. Luther Burden is also a pretty good upside pick on day 2. And I like Ozzie Trapelo. He is a big man and has starter potential, so the offensive line is not going ignored. And Shamar Turner is a solid pick, I would say. It's not bad, not great. Just solid pick. However, their day 3 is a bit weird. Ruben Hippolyte, not a great value pick. Picked him super high, and he's just not all that great. Saul Frazier is a player I like on day 3, but I do feel like round 5 is a bit early for him. He's a traits guy, and that's about it. Luke Newman is an okay pick, but the pick I really like is Kyle Mungai. I think they got a steal in him. He should have gone much higher than round 7, and I think will be a solid RB2. But overall, I'm going to give this class a B. I like their day 1 and day 2. I don't love it. I like it. And their day 3 picks are not my favorite outside of Kyle Mungai. Next up is the Bengals. And honestly, not really my favorite draft. I'm not big on Shamar Stewart. He's a very boom or bust potential, but I just lean towards the bust side for Shamar Stewart. And Demetrius Knight is a good player, but I'm not sure they got him at a very good value. And Dylan Fairchild is a developmental guard who I like more than the first 2 picks. Their day 3 picks are pretty solid value though. I especially like Taj Brooks late, but Barrett Carter and Jalen Rivers are pretty solid picks as well. I'm just not a big fan of their top 2 picks, and I don't think they got the best out of them. So I'm going to give this class a C. When you're using day 3 picks to justify how good a class is, it's probably not that good of a class. And I'm just personally not that high on their round 1 and round 2 picks. Maybe they prove me wrong. We'll see. Now we get to the Browns draft. This is an interesting one. I like Mason Graham, I like Carson Schlesinger, and I like Quinshon Judkins as players. However, I'm not a huge fan of the trade down. I know they got a lot of value from the Jaguars. An extra second and a first round pick next year is very good value. Do you really want to be the team that traded away a possibility to get an elite player for just a very good one? I don't know. Mason Graham, I like him as a player, but the drop-off from Travis Hunter to Mason Graham is a significant drop-off. Carson Schlesinger, good player in the second. I don't hate that pick. I like that pick. Quinshon Judkins, I like him as a running back. I think he's a great power back. Harold Fannin, I think is a decent pick. Not huge on Fannin, but I think he's solid. However, we start getting weird here. I don't like these next 3 picks. Dylan Gabriel is a huge reach in the 3rd. That was a bad pick. Dylan Sampson, a good day 3 running back. But why are we selecting another running back? And then Shedeur Sanders with the final pick. Sure, some people will love it. I just think it's a weird pick. I feel like ownership just stepped in and forced the front office to pick someone they didn't want to draft. We'll see if he ends up starting, but I just don't think he's going to be a very good starter. And you've already wasted a pick on a quarterback. 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks. I'm not a big fan of this draft. And the trade down from an elite, possibly franchise-changing player it's a yikes to me, personally. We'll see how this turns out. I like their top 3 players, but I'm going to give this class a C+. This class just felt really forced at the end, and I feel like the front office was kind of flailing when it came to the later picks. On to the Dallas Cowboys. I like these first 3 picks. Tyler Booker at 12, yeah, that's a reach, but you can't help but root for the guy. I really like the guy. As a player, I think he will be decent, maybe not great, but he should be decent, though it is a bit of a reach for a need here. However, their next 2 picks are great value. Donovan Ezeraku, I was lower on him than most, but where they ended up getting him is where I am comfortable with him being. A lot of people had him as a first round prospect. I just didn't see it personally. Yeah, he has some great tape and production, but his size is a factor. But I think as a second round pick, he should be a great pairing with Micah Parsons. And Siobhan Revel, he's coming off an injury, but he was a great corner in 2023. So I think this is a steal in round 3. The Cowboys need help in their secondary, and Siobhan Revel is a great pick to help fix that. The rest of their picks are fine. Nothing really stands out in my opinion. They had a bunch of late round picks, plenty of dart throws. I'm sure at least a few of these players will turn into some contributors, like on special teams or as a backup. Jaden Blue is fine in round 5. They traded up for Shamar James, which he does have some upside since he is very young. He's only 20 years old. And he does have crazy athleticism and blitzing ability, though not sure he's really all that great in coverage. And Johnny Cornelius is a decent depth option. He's a swing tackle probably and has some flexibility. So should be a solid pick in the 6th round for depth. And the last 3 picks, fine. I don't really care about 7th round picks. They're not going to really affect my grade much unless they're really good. But overall, I'm going to give the Dallas Cowboys an A-. I think their top 3 picks will help build this team, and maybe one of their later round picks will add some depth somewhere. Now, the Broncos are an interesting draft. Their crown jewel of this draft is Jahdae Barron. A very unexpected pick, but hey, when he's on the board, you just gotta take him and turn that secondary into an elite secondary, and adding him next to Patrick Surtain makes this secondary elite. He's my personal favorite corner of this draft, so I think they got a very good player. Their next few picks are weird. RJ Harvey, I like as a player, but 2nd round was a bit of a surprise for me. Pat Bryant, this is a bit early for him. He's a big dude, contested catch guy, and has good run blocking ability. However, his limited athleticism kinda hampers his upside. Savion Jones is a good pick there. Hugh Robinson, solid developmental edge. And punter, sure, go for it. I don't really care. 6th round is where you get specialists like this. And Caleb Lohner is also an interesting pick as well. Developmental tight end. He's not going to have a big impact right away, but he's 6'7", 250 and is a good athlete as well. Hey, worth a shot in the 7th round. That's what the 7th round is for high upside guys. And Caleb Lohner is perfect. But I'm going to give this draft a B+. I don't love the reaches in the 2nd and 3rd round, though adding Jahdae Barron is good enough on its own. The rest, mostly depth, and maybe RJ Harvey turns out to be a very good RB1, and maybe Pat Bryant is a decent wide receiver too. We'll see. And now we get into the Lions class, and this is a rough one. We started out with a big reach in round 1, Tyleik Williams, not a 1st round prospect. In my opinion, this was at best a day 2 prospect for a run-stuffing defensive tackle. Tate Ratledge in the 2nd, though a bit earlier than I expected him to go, is a solid pick. I think he can start right away if he needs to. But this is the main thing about this class. Isaac Tesla at pick 70. They not only reached on a day 3 wide receiver, they traded up for him. And it wasn't cheap either. They gave up 2/3 next year just to trade up with the Jaguars for Isaac Tesla. I have to know who was going for this guy, because this was a day 3 prospect at best. Yeah, he's an athletic freak, but he's got no production and needs some serious polish. This was an awful pick, in my opinion. Awful pick combined with an awful trade. The rest of the day 3 picks, mostly depth guys. Maybe Miles Frazier is decent. He has a little bit of upside versatility, but he's really just a backup. And no one else really inspires me in this class. But that round 3 trades, God, maybe I would have given this like a B- on its own, but with that round 3 trade in mind, I'm giving this a C-. There aren't many impact starters in this draft, and I feel like Brad Holmes was trying to outsmart the league for some reason here. It's worked out in the past, but I'm not sure it works out in this draft. Now we have another NFC North team in the Green Bay Packers. In terms of hosting the draft, they get an A. However, we're here to grade what they actually picked, so let's get to that. They finally pick a wide receiver in the first round to help Jordan Love, but personally, he's not my favorite wide receiver, but my favorite wide receiver already went off the board, so you gotta take what you can get. Anthony Belton, though a decent offensive tackle prospect, it's a bit of a reach for him, and there were certainly some better defensive players on the board. Savion Williams is pretty raw, and for a 3rd round pick, I kind of question if this is what they really wanted. And a notable trend among these wide receivers is they have a lot of drops, so the Packers have a type: receivers who can't really catch. When it gets into day 3, it's a lot of high upside guys like Colin Oliver, like Warren Brinson, like John Williams, mostly just high upside guys, which is fair on day 3. I don't mind that, but I don't think they really got the best value at the top of their board. Matthew Golden should improve their wide receiver core, but I'm not sure Savion Williams will, and Anthony Belton, not a huge fan of at pick 22. It's just okay sort of draft. I'm going to give this draft a C+. I don't really like the top end talent, and the day 3 picks were just okay. Decent high upside flyers, but nothing really inspiring. Now we have the Houston Texans. I'm sure CJ Stroud will appreciate this pair of Iowa State receivers when he's on the ground. They did try to address the offensive line with Ariante Ursary. However, I'm not all that high on Ursary. I think he's at best going to be an average tackle. Yeah, he's big, has a good first step, but his lateral agility is lacking. And Jaden Higgins, good pick. They were able to get in front of the wide receiver run that ended up happening. And Jalen Knoll is a solid pick in the 3rd round. The rest of their picks are okay. Woody Marks, trading up for him and then reaching on a player is a bold choice. But I do like Jalen Reed in the 6th round. I think they got good value on him. Backup safety, possible special teams. The rest, just depth players, and not sure if the last 2 even make the team. We'll see. Honestly, not an all-inspiring draft by the Texans. Decent pieces at the top, but not a whole lot added in day 3. I'm going to give the Texans a B-. Now we have another AFC South team in the Indianapolis Colts. I love their Tyler Warren pick. I think he's great value at 14, and he's a super versatile piece on that Colts offense. However, I don't really like a whole lot in their draft. JT Tuamaloau is decent in the 2nd round, though Justin Wally is a big reach at 80, and everyone else just okay. DJ Giddens, in my opinion, is probably their best day 3 pick, but behind Jonathan Taylor, do you expect him to do a whole lot? RB2 in the 5th round, that's fine to be honest, but I'm not thrilled about any of these other picks. Riley Leonard honestly may end up starting for the Colts, depending on how this QB battle goes. But overall, I'm just not all that impressed by this Colts draft. I see maybe one impact starter in Tyler Warren, and maybe Tuamaloau gets some good snaps. But I'm just not overall that big on this class. so I'm going to give it a C+. In my opinion, probably the most mid-class out of anyone. One impact starter, and the rest are just depth pieces, in my opinion. Maybe some of these pieces end up working, like DJ Giddens, but we'll see. And here's another AFC South team. This time, I think they did a lot better than the other two. Travis Hunter, best player in the draft. We'll see how they end up using him, but as just a wide receiver, he's going to make a big impact on this offense beside Brian Thomas Jr. Now, the rest of their picks do get a bit interesting. Caleb Ransaw, though a bit of a reach, will end up playing safety and has been touted for his versatility and his tackling ability. Wyatt Millum, great value pick in the 3rd round and could compete for a starting role right away. Bashal Tutin is a potential draft gem for the Jaguars. In my opinion, he is Walmart Ashton Genty. And speaking of getting cheap versions of top players, Jalen McLeod is Dollar Tree Jalen Walker, which does make it pretty interesting. Jack Kaiser, interesting pick. Right now it's depth, but possibly could turn into a starter depending on his development. He is also a bit old. Rayon Lane is a special teams guy. And the last two players, Jonah Moenheim and LaQuint Allen, they're depth players, so it is what it is. But overall, I give this class an A. I'm higher on this class than most because I think Travis Hunter being the crowning gem of this draft class is better than most. And I actually think they've got some solid picks in here, despite a few reaches here and there. One thing that is helping this grade out a little bit is that trade with the Lions, with them getting future thirds, which helps them get some compensation back for the Browns trade up for Travis Hunter. Yes, that trade was expensive, but if Travis Hunter is the player we think he can be, the compensation won't matter. Now we have the Kansas City Chiefs, and I like their draft overall. Josh Simmons, A+. You trade back, get a free 5th round pick, and you still get one of the best tackles in the draft. If it wasn't for his injury, probably goes top 10. Omar Norman Lott, one of the best pass rush and defensive tackles in this draft. He didn't play a bunch of run defense with Tennessee. We'll see if that's just a lack of ability or if the Vols just decided they didn't want him on rundowns. Ashton Gillette is a bit of a reach in the 3rd round, but Jalen Royals is a great pick in the 4th round, so that kind of balances out each other. Noel Williams, I think, is a pretty solid corner pick. Jeffrey Bossa, depth linebacker, and Brashard Smith also depth at running back. There's still some more the Chiefs could work on. They still need some more work on the offensive line. They still need another running back, but you could only do so much with 7 picks, and with the picks they had, I think they did a great job. So I'm going to give this class an A. I really like what they got from Josh Simmons, and I like basically their top 5 picks. I love all of them. Another AFC West team with the Las Vegas Raiders. At the top of their draft, they went Ashton Genty. I like the pick. Positional value be damned. He's one of the best running backs we've seen come out of college in a while, and I think the Raiders really needed to get on it because they have no running backs. So Ashton Genty brings an immediate boost to their offense. Jack Besh is also another pretty interesting one. A little bit earlier than I expected him to go, but it's not because he's a bad player either. Darian Porter in the 3rd, pretty solid. Though the rest of their picks are kinda okay. Dante Thornton, big guy, lots of speed, not super productive in college though, so a little bit of a developmental pick there. Tonka Hemingway, a big dude. We'll see if he turns out any more than depth. JJ Pague is a good pick though. He's fantastic value in the 6th. But the rest of their picks are just okay, to be honest. This could have been a really good class, but I think it's just a good class. But still, I like what they did. Their crowning jewel is Ashton Genty, so I'm going to give it an A-. Could have been a better class, but still a really good class, especially at the top of it. The first of the 2 Los Angeles teams, and I think they had a solid draft. Omarion Hampton kind of just feels like a faster Najee Harris, and they already have Najee Harris. So it's a little bit weird they just have 2 of the same back on the team, but hey, he is faster and maybe could provide a bigger impact than Najee Harris. Trey Harris, I do like that pick. I think he could be a good complement to Ladd McConkey. Jamari Caldwell, high upside defensive tackle. Same with Lambert Smith and Gadsden. Both of those are high upside players, which are fine on day 3. And Kyle Kennard could be a solid rotational edge player for you. The rest of these picks, just depth pieces. I do like RJ Mickens in the 6th. I think they got good value for him. But overall, just not a lot of high-end starter players. Just a lot of decent players that could play as a good starter and maybe develop a little bit and maybe have an impact later on. We'll see. This definitely feels like a Jim Harbaugh draft with just big, strong, physical dudes. Fits the theme, but just not thrilled with the class. I think it's solid. So I'm just going to give it a straight B. Good class, not great class. The second of the LA teams. But for a GM that's really good at drafting, I'm overall not impressed with this draft. Not many impact starters, especially in positions of need like cornerback or offensive line. Really, the only starter I see from this is Terrence Ferguson. And was he really the best option on the board? I'm not sure. Josiah Stewart, rotational edge. Solid guy, probably will be productive in the NFL. Ty Hamilton and Chris Paul Jr. are good value in the 5th, but mostly depth here and rotational pieces. They needed help at offensive line and corner. Didn't really address that this draft, but they did get a first for next year, so maybe next year will be a better draft. But for this draft by itself, I'm giving it a B-. Would be lower without the first round pick next year, but I think they could have done something in the first round. But hey, next year's draft probably be better. That's where they'll improve the most. Miami is next, and overall, I'm not impressed with this class. The Dolphins decided to reach on Kenneth Grant at 13 when they had more pressing needs. Yes, all the good offensive linemen came off the board, but you could have addressed secondary there. There was still some good safeties and corners on the board. The round 2 pick was also a pretty big reach. They traded up for this guy, and I'm not sure they really needed to. There were better guards available, and you didn't need to trade up and reach. I'm not thrilled with that selection. Dante Trader and Ollie Gordon were good value picks in the 5th and 6th rounds, but you can't really rely on day 3 to really build up your roster. To be honest, I don't think the Dolphins are able to compete this year because they've gutted their roster. Their defense has basically no one on it, and their offense looks like it's fading. This draft doesn't inspire confidence, and I think they're gearing up for next year at this point. I'm grading this draft a C. Maybe Kenneth Grant is able to do something and Savanaia ends up being a decent pick, but there isn't a whole lot to this class in my opinion. I don't think the Dolphins will be competitive this year. And now we're to the last NFC North team in the Minnesota Vikings. What's with NFC North teams and just not having good drafts? This one is probably the worst one. They didn't have a lot of picks and didn't do much with them. Donovan Jackson at pick 24 was a reach, but looks like they needed to reach on him first. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got him because the Texans were about to reach for him. Ty Felton is okay. I'm not thrilled with that pick when they could, get secondary. There was some good options. And then they proceeded to not do anything about the secondary. Granted, day 3, you're not going to do much with it, but you could get at least a developmental guy like Zaw Frazier. And then you just didn't do that. I don't really like any of these picks. And then you didn't trade down at all. I mean, look, they did have a need at offensive line. So I'm going to give them that. They at least addressed something, and Jordan Addison could get suspended. We'll see. I just don't really like this. I'm giving it a C-. The only reason I'm not dropping it lower is because, they didn't have many picks to begin with, but the way they managed it wasn't very good. At least they got a starter, maybe 2. Next up, we have the New England Patriots. I like what they did. They are trying to give Drake May a chance here. That roster was pretty devoid of talent, and they've tried to inject some into it. Will Campbell, maybe not my favorite pick in the top 5. You still needed to go after offensive line. I like it, and worst case scenario, he goes to guard and performs very well. Travion Henderson, electric running back, though he does have some injury concerns, so I wonder if round 2 was really the best pick, but I doubt he falls to round 3 anyway, so it is what it is. Kyle Williams, I like that pick. I do think he can be a good wide receiver in the NFL. Jared Wilson, love that pick in the 3rd round. Continuing to build up that offensive line. And they got some good value in Joshua Farmer and Braden Swinson. I love their values on day 3. And I think they got a very good kicker in Andres Borregales. I hope I pronounced that right. They also drafted a long snapper in round 7, but it's round 7, so I don't really care. And Kobe Minor, whatever pick, but it led to a legendary tweet that ended up getting deleted. So that's the cool part about him. Anyways, the rest of their class, solid. I like how they approached this draft. I'm going to give it an A-. I like what they did. Not always my most favorite player in each spot, but the overall strategy made a lot of sense. Early picks focused on offense and then try to get some depth on defense. And hey, Joshua Farmer and Braden Swinson on day 3, fantastic value for them both. Now we get to the Saints. Not a great draft and had a lot of controversy. Kelvin Banks, not great value at 9, but he is a good player. Need help on that offensive line. Trevor Penning hasn't worked out, so Banks is a good pick, not a great pick at 9. Tyler Shook is by far the worst pick in this draft. Why was he a round 2 pick? He's really not that good. He's old, not a lot of upside. Just pick Shedeur Sanders, honestly. They really should have just picked Shedeur Sanders and it would have been okay. Just not a good pick there. And the rest of the picks are meh. I like Jonas Sanker. I like Danny Stutzman. Quincy Riley is a good pick. Devin Neal is a good 6th round pick. A lot of goods, but no great picks. I wouldn't be excited for this class if I was a Saints fan. There's some players to like, but not a lot to love, in my opinion. So I'm going to give this class a C+. It's okay, really. Just kind of mid, to be honest. They didn't get terrible value on day 3, but they didn't get much on day 1 or day 2. The first of 2 New Jersey teams, the New York Giants. Honestly, I like what the Giants have done. Pretty good draft overall. I think they got great value on a lot of their picks. Abdul Carter, one of the best players in the draft. Makes sense to take him at 3. Jackson Dart is really the only one I don't really like. I just don't think this guy will be any good. He's not under any pressure to start right now. And honestly, this pick maybe lets Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll keep their job for 1 more year, but he's developmental. He's extremely raw. Yeah, he's got the physicals for it, but not sure he really pans out. But I do like everything else. I love Darius Alexander. I love Cam Scatterbo. I love Marcus Mbao. I think they got great value on all of those picks. The round 7 picks, whatever. I don't really care for them. But I'm going to give this class an A-. Honestly, if they didn't draft a quarterback, I might have given this a better grade, or maybe drafted a quarterback later. I would have given this a better grade. I'm just not that big on Jackson Dart, and the trade up, not really my favorite thing. We'll see if it pans out, but I really like what they did in the rest of the draft, though. Now to the other New Jersey team, the New York Jets. Solid draft class. I like Armand Membu at 7. I think he's a great fit for them. Mason Taylor in round 2 is he's not really that dynamic of a playmaker. He's decent, but do you really want that out of a round 2 pick? I think you could have gone with a round 3 tight end and gotten a better playmaker in round 2. Azariah Thomas in round 3. I love this pick. I think you got great value for him. He's a great man corner, doesn't need to be a number 1 corner, and will pair alongside Sauce Gardner just fine. I think this is a steal of a pick. Arian Smith, though, what are we doing? This is a massive reach. Malachi Moore, I like it. I think he's a good player, but round 4, I'm not a big fan of the value there, but I do like Malachi Moore as a player. And the last 2 picks, kind of whatever. Not thrilled by either one of them, just depth picks. They didn't really do a whole lot. Really, the best players in this draft are Armand Memu and Azariah Thomas. And if that's all you get from this draft class, it's decent, I would say. I like the top end of this class, but there's not a whole lot in between, just a bunch of filler players outside of Malachi Moore. I think Malachi Moore could be a good contributor, but I'm going to give this class a B. I think they got decent value at the top. The rest of their day 3 picks weren't all that great. I only really like one of their day 3 picks. They didn't really have a whole lot of draft picks. I think the Jets just did fine. We'll see how it turns out for them. So now comes up the Philadelphia Eagles. Jahad Campbell, steal of a pick in the first round. I was a little bit salty when Jahad Campbell fell to the Eagles because he's one of my favorite linebackers in this class. I'm like, oh, of course he gets to the Eagles. And then Andrew Makuba is a safety I really liked on day 2. A little bit surprised he went to the Eagles in the second round, but they got a good player out of it, so it is what it is. Day 3, they had a lot of day 3 picks. Ty Robinson, of course they got him. Mac McWilliams, I think, is being a little bit underrated. He's a nickel corner, and I think he could turn into something. And of course the Eagles grabbed him. Why wouldn't they? The rest of these players are mostly just developmental guys. They grabbed a lot of developmental offensive linemen. Kyle McCord is a whatever backup quarterback pick. And then Antoine Powell-Ryland. Great pick in the 6th round. I don't know how he got there, but fantastic value for the Eagles there. Of course they would get a really good defensive player this late. We'll see how this class turns out, but I like what the Eagles did here. I'm going to give them an A+. They do what they did every year. Let the really good defensive players fall to them. And they took some developmental shots late. There was a few reaches here and there, like Makuba honestly was a 3rd round safety, but pick 32 in the 2nd round may as well be a 3rd round pick, so it's not that big of a reach. I just really like what the Eagles did. The Steelers are up next, and I think they had a pretty solid class. Not thrilling, not exactly exciting either, but solid. I like the Derek Harmon pick. I'm glad they decided not to reach on a quarterback. This quarterback class isn't very good, and it would have been better to take a developmental guy, which they ended up not doing. They ended up taking Will Howard in the 6th. He is not starting, and they are betting a lot on getting Aaron Rodgers. I personally would have gone for someone maybe in the 3rd or 4th round. Maybe a Jalen Milroe. And that might have been like a better option for the Steelers. But Caleb Johnson is a decent pick. They did lose Najee Harris, so they needed to add someone to that running back room. Caleb Johnson is a decent pick. Jack Sawyer, also pretty decent pick. High motor guy. Maybe not super physically gifted, but pretty solid. Not bad value. Yahya Black was probably the biggest reach, but it's day 3 and reaches matter less at that point. So it is what it is. And the rest of their day 3 wasn't all that inspiring. They were kind of late to quarterback, and their last 7th round picks are whatever. Depth picks. Maybe they make the roster. Overall, it is an okay class. I would give it a solid B because I think Derek Harmon and Caleb Johnson will be starters, and Jack Sawyer may be able to contribute early on. That's a solid class in my opinion, being able to get at least 3 contributors out of it. Now we go to the 49ers. This class is defense heavy because they brought back Robert Saleh and they needed a lot of picks on defense. They lost a lot of players from their defense in free agency, so they really needed to restock their team. I'm not sure they were the most efficient with their picks, though. Mykel Williams, I like his upside. I think he was a good fit for the 49ers, though maybe not the best available player in the 1st round. Alfred Collins, run stuff in D tackle. Probably not the best D tackle available. Nick Martin, definitely not the best linebacker available. That was a massive reach. Uptown Stout, why is he on day 2? This is a day 3 pick. This is a 6th round prospect going in the 3rd. Very bad value here. Though CJ West is good value in the 4th. I also like Jordan James in the 5th. Good value for him. Curtis Rourke, whatever. And the rest of their picks are mostly just depth. It seems they came into this draft with a strategy to focus on their defense to allow Robert Saleh to really cook. Their offense was seriously neglected with not a lot of effort to really help the offensive line, try to get cheaper receivers. And yeah, they did go for running back, but not the best running back they could have gotten. Not super impressed with the class, but I can at least respect the strategy. So I'm going to give them a C+. I'm not thrilled with the class though. I don't think it was an efficient use of picks. Some serious reaches in valuable spots where the third and fourth rounds were filled with lots of value. And they just threw that out the window for some reason. Now we go up north to the Seattle Seahawks. And I really like this draft. Gray Zabel, great fit for them. He can play all over the line, but he specifically addresses their need at guard. Nick Emmanwori, presumable first round pick, falls to the second where he originally was. They got him at 35, great value for him. Elijah Arroyo, high upside tight end, though he has some injury concerns. Good pick for him as well. Jalen Milroe, developmental QB, fine pick in round 3. They have Sam Darnold right now, who I expect to be more of a bridge quarterback than a permanent answer. Maybe Jalen Milroe can develop, and you got a nice player. Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton is a nice option in round 5. Good player overall. I could actually see him starting. Robbie Oots, fullback. That's fun. But they got great value in Damian Martinez in round 7. I thought he'd go earlier than this, so it's a surprise to see him this late. And Ricky White, good late round pick. I like him in round 7. A fun receiver, most likely a special teamer, but he could come in packages on offense. Overall, I really like this draft. They did a lot to go after their offensive line needs. Still could continue to add to it, but I found they got great value otherwise. So I'm going to give this draft an A. Very close to get an A+, but just some of the value in day 3 wasn't the greatest, and I think they could have done more for their offensive line, but otherwise, very good draft. Now we're moving to the other coast, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this is a pretty good class. Though Emeka Egbuka is a bit of a surprise, there is some logic to it. Mike Evans is getting old, and Chris Godwin is coming off a pretty big injury. Jalen McMillan is a wide receiver 3. You can't really expect him to fill in for both of them. And injuries really did hurt their wide receiver room last year, so I could understand why they'd want to get an extra wide receiver, but I'm not sure spending a first round pick was the best use of resources. But I like their day 2 picks. Benjamin Morrison, great pick. Jacob Parrish, solid pick in round 3. I like the David Walker pick. I like Elijah Roberts. Both are good depth. Tez Johnson, okay, flyer on a speedster, but he is really small, so I worry about his durability. They didn't really have that many picks. Not sure it was the best use of resources, but they got some good players. Would have liked to see linebacker addressed here. Jihad Campbell was on the board at 19. They could have gone there. I think that would have been a better pick than Emeka Egbuka, but they got good players, so I can't really hate. A- in my opinion. Now we go to the number 1 overall pick in the Tennessee Titans. They went Cam Ward, the worst kept secret in this draft. Not the best player in this draft, but the best quarterback at least, and they really needed it because Will Levis is not working out. The rest of their picks are solid. Oladejo isn't the greatest value in the second round, but they did trade down and got an extra third, which turned into Kevin Winston, who I think is a really good pick. He's coming off an injury, but his tape shows he's one of the best safeties in this class, so if he comes back from that injury to nearly what he was in college, he could be a very good safety for the Titans. Shamir Dyke, yeah, that's a reach there in the 4th round. But Alec Ayomanor was probably the better pick, and they got him later. So, swap those 2 picks. Same thing. Gunnar Helm is a solid developmental tight end, and Jackson Slater is a good backup guard. Rest are just depth picks, but it's clear they're trying to build an offense around Cam Ward, which is more than they did with Will Levis. We'll see how this turns out for them. Solid class. Kevin Winston is my favorite pick here, but overall I didn't think they really got the best value out of their picks outside of a few like Ayomanor and Slater. So I'm just going to give it a B+. Solid class. They got what hopefully will be the quarterback of their future and some decent players alongside it. The Commanders weren't coming into this draft with a lot of draft picks. And sending some of them to the Texans for Laramie Tunsil lowered that amount pretty significantly. Now they only have 5 picks, but I think they made the most of it. Josh Connerly, probably not the best offensive lineman available, but still a solid option. Trey Amos is my favorite pick in this class. I think he's a steal at 61. I think he should have gone way higher in the second. He makes plays on the football and is good in coverage as well. I think the Commanders got a really good corner out of him. And Jalen Lane, solid wide receiver, speedster, should pair along nicely with Terry McLaurin. The rest of their picks, just some depth pieces, which is okay. But overall, I give this class an A-. Not the best value in the first, and maybe not the greatest value in the fourth, but I really like their pick in Trey Amos. And yeah, that'll wrap up the grades in this video. If you enjoyed watching, please leave a like and sub, and let me know what you think of these grades. Did you disagree with any of them? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in my next video.